Hello and welcome to my workshop. So we're going to be getting back on the Dodge Coronet build, and this is a 1/8 scale drag car with a flip forward front clip, I guess. And we're going to get trying to get most of this finished up today if we can. So let's get to that. So I'm trying to get the shape of the roof. And I'm using paper templates from the drawings I made, as well as a 1/25 scale model to get those dimensions drawn out on the MDF. So I try to use the belt sander to get the bulk of the material off. Do most of the shaping, and you can get pretty close, but I found that hand sanding really gets you there to the final end. Luckily I have this Dremel tool I'd kind of forgotten about for a while that has a sanding feature on it. It really takes a lot of the hand sanding effort away, and really works well to shape these parts down quickly. So here I'm trying to build up the side profile in a way to keep from having to do so much grinding and shaping. So if I get the angle close, then I don't have to take that much off, and so I'm using those pieces of the shim to kind of get that angle just right. So even when you get the calculations done and the measurements and stuff, it really does come down to how it looks. So I'll get the stuff drawn up, you do the scaling off of the model, do the calculations, and then just kind of step back and see what it looks like, and then I might make adjustments just to make it appear correct. So this is just a little slight detail around the roof of the car, and a lot of these details won't show up well with the vacuum mold, but I figured this one might come up, show up a little bit better, and so I'm just taking the time to cut a little bit of a groove around the edge. So I have the form finished up for the roof. It looks a little funky here, and I realize that, but one of the things I've figured out with the new vacuum former is that all the sides have to be completely blocked off. What happens is that thing pulls such a strong vacuum now that it will actually pull so far underneath, it'll pop the plastic and then you'll lose your vacuum. So once I get the shape exactly right and get it set up on the car the way I want it, basically I had to come back and figure out how I want to get the form to fit on the table. So I wanted this end to be raised up a little bit because this white piece of plastic will be the edge that I'll cut to, and this edge right here will be the lowest point I wanted to cut to. So just by tipping this up, it automatically had that raised up. And then once I had this front piece, the rest is just kind of finding scraps of wood I have laying around and super gluing them in. Obviously not really caring how they look or how they're put in, as long as they're on the inside and out of the way of where my final cuts will be, which is again this white plastic in the back, the white plastic in the front, this little edge right here, and that edge right there, and then right along the edge here. So that should make a pretty good mold. So let's see if we can get that pulled. So once the part comes out of the vacuum mold, I just need to get this thing solvent glued down to the body, and then start working on the other details that line up with it. So here I'm trying to get the vent windows scratch built. I decided that would be easier than trying to make some kind of a complicated mold for these. You just pretty quickly knock these out. So here I'm trying to build up some material, some thicker styrene, and you know, shaping this, getting the two pieces glued together, and giving me enough bulk material to kind of come back and sand a contour down for the A-pillar, and then get that glued into place. Again, it's just a lot of, you know, the scratch building part of it is just a lot of little fiddly tweaks, sanding, filing, cutting, you know, offering up to the car, and then eventually, you know, you kind of see when it's right, and that's when you glue it on and then proceed forward. Right now I'm trying to add in the drip rail that goes around the top of the car, and this is one of the details that's just really hard to get molded in from the vacuum form, so it's easier to just come back and add some small styrene pieces to this later. Okay, so finished up with the roof, got that vacuum formed and glued up onto the body. Scratch built some pieces here in the front for the A-pillars and for the side vents. You know, added a little trim piece around here. These small details are hard to get molded in, so I found it's easier to add them later. So, you know, still a lot more work to do back here. You know, still got to get the whole rear and the taillights and stuff sorted out, but it's really coming along nicely. What I need to get to next is getting the structure for the front clip. So let's get on to that. So I'm using this flexible ruler to, again, get the curve down based off of the drawing I have, and then transfer that over to the wood. And then I can take that to the grinder and get that thing shaped properly, and then really start getting that front end looking good. So one of the things I try to do is sand right up to the edge first, and do that all the way around, and then come back, and basically you're kind of meeting the middle up to the tip that you've already cut, and sand it down to that profile that you've drawn. So to match the that center lowered section that goes all the way down the body, just taking a Dremel tool and carefully carving out that section along, you know, coming back, sanding, using different attachments with the Dremel tool, and to get that down to the proper depth and look. One of the things I try to do is add on these little styrene pieces where needed, and this one is just to add a little bit of that flare right around where the wheel arch is. And so it's just a piece of quarter round styrene, and I'm just kind of shaping that by hand and then super gluing that down to the mold. So on the top here, I decided to go with a styrene to get that shape just right, and I almost wish I just went with wood. It might have went a little bit easier, Ended up working out in the end, but I think it was a little more trouble doing this way than if I had just figured out a way to add some wood to the pieces. The kind of the name of the game is to you know, make the one piece that you want correct, get that as accurate as possible, and then have a mirror copy of that. So you're always taking the piece you've just made and checking back and forth to make sure that you got the contours, the shape, the dimensionality, everything correct. Yeah, so a lot of work to get these two fenders ready to be vacuum formed. I think I'm there, but you know, time will tell. You pull a mold and you come out, it could not just fit right or doesn't look right. You can always come back and modify the mold again. But hopefully these will turn out first time, and we can get the fenders ready to go on this structure here in the front. Once we do that, then we'll be able to come back and make a mold for the hood, and then come in and get the grill. Now obviously I'll have to come in and cut this out to match up with where the fenders are at, but I can do that pretty easily once I get the fenders mounted up. Alright, so let's get to that. So once you pull it out of the vacuum form, you just need to do some trimming to get the edges trimmed off and get it down to final shape. I usually try to have some kind of a register mark on the mold, so that makes it a little bit easier. So now I'm trying to build out the front end and get that into one piece. And I think, as I mentioned, this is going to be where it's going to be a flip forward front end. So the whole front clip, fender, hood, grill, everything will be attached, and that would pivot and flip forward. So I'm having to make this as one unit and then have it separate. So I'm modeling this one off of an RT hood, and kind of my idea is that, you know, this car is going to be a drag car, so you know, he got this kit, the front end fiberglass kit, and it's an RT kit, and he puts it on a regular old body that he had, and so that's kind of the idea I had, trying to think through how this thing would actually be in real life. So so I'm making the RT hood. It has some extra grills at the back that the other ones didn't have. And so here I thought it would be easier to have the raised up section where the center is sunk down, just down by adding some styrene to the hood instead of trying to carve that whole center section out. Okay, so the hood is finished and ready to be vacuum formed. Pretty simple mold. It doesn't look like there's much to it, but it does have, you know, taper side to side, front to back. You know, put a little bit of a turn down on the front for the nose of the hood. Added this styrene to bump this up where it's got it recessed, and then also just made couple of styrene pieces that'll represent I think these are intake vents, and I believe this is an RT hood. I also went around and cut a line all the way around the mold, and what that'll do is that'll give me a nice cut line to go to. So if I make the mold in the future where the hood is separate, then I'll have a nice area to cut down and give it a little more rigidity where it's not just flat. You know, those little turn downs really add a lot of strength. But if I, you know, for the one I'm doing now, I'll end up just cutting it right up to the top because it's just going to glue right into the front clip. So ready to vacuum form that, so let's get to it. So just a little bit of trimming on the hood and work your way around, get that thing a little bit sanded down, and then make sure it fits well with the car. If it doesn't, then just go back to the mold and kind of rework that thing. So I ended up making the trunk a little bit different than what it would actually be. So the seam is all the way to the very edge where the fender is, but the actual trunk is way inside. And you'll see later, you just carve that detail in with a scribe tool. So here again, just taking a Dremel and kind of working down the angles and getting everything set up correctly. So now I'm just taking a paper template and kind of drawing out where that trunk goes, and then using this Tamiya scribe tool to carve in those details which would represent where the trunk would actually open up. So just use a little bit of super glue to fill in some of the gaps, and then come back with the Tamiya filler and put that over the top and get that smoothed out. Okay, so I finished up the rear section here. Now there's still a lot of gaps and finished detail work that has to be done around here, but I'll come back and do all that at one time. I think this is good enough to move forward. I also still have to add in like a trim detail all the way around here, come up with something for the tail lights, reverse lights, see if I can get the Dodge letters across here. I'm not 100% sure I'll be able to get those, but I'll see what I can do. I've also taken the time to cut in the panel line for the trunk, and I think that'll turn out pretty good. And that that comes all the way down here, so the trunk wraps around. Threw a coat of primer on the body, and just trying to see some of the areas I need to work on, and sanding and filling some of those. But I think the next thing I'll need to get onto is finishing up this firewall. I'm just going to add a couple more details on here, and then I think we'll be in pretty good shape. Okay, well, let's just get to that. So basically doing the same thing for the front as I just did for the rear, just taking careful measurements and then coming up with a piece of wood that'll fit in here, and then just slowly coming up with an idea of how best to make this mold. So what I ended up figuring out is that it was probably best to make this the two-part grill. So there's a substructure which almost recesses back down from the fender and the hood. It has some angles tapers in, as well as kind of contours along the front of the hood. It's not exactly straight. So what I ended up doing was just taking some MDF and figuring out the best angle, cutting that on the my table saw, and then coming back and dremeling and filing and sanding that piece down, and then just super gluing them on, and you can see I made that recess now. So the second part of the grill is kind of the iconic part. It has the slats that run from top to bottom, and has the 4 light buckets, 2 on each side. So I'm making that piece separate, and then they would basically just form them together, and then eventually glue 2 pieces down inside. So this part really took quite a bit of time, and so what I'm ended up doing is trying to get those slats, and they're really spaced close together. So what I ended up doing was getting 1mm styrene half round and glued those to the front. Okay, so I've made some really good progress on the Coronet here. We've got the front is now detachable, has some magnets that hold it in place. Still a lot more work to get the body lines just right and get the details. I also want to come back and put some more magnets at the bottom. The grill in the front is done. That took a long time. It's basically 2 vacuum form pieces, so this piece and this inner piece, and then 1mm half round strips laid from top to bottom all the way across. It took several days to get all these put on there, and then you sand it down a little bit and give it that look of the of that Coronet grill. I'm going to come back and chrome paint this both pieces, and then that way he'll have this nice and chrome, and he'll be able to finish this off and tape it off separately to finish the rest of the body. Like I said, I still have quite a bit more to do, but I think I'm going to call it on this one. It's really taking a lot to get this done, and I think there's plenty enough material for one more video. So making really good, like I said, making really good progress, but still got so much more to go. But till then, we'll see you on the rocks.